morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of The Serene View. I am Serene Singh, your host. And today with me is a very special guest to talk about men's mental health. Now, today we're going to talk about the Superman myth, why men believe that they should be big, tough, strong, and Superman. And to talk about it with us, we have Brian. Brian is an ex-Superman. For 30 years, he was Superman. He was saving every organization until he kind of realized that, it may not be the best thing for his mental health. And now he's saving the world in a different way. He has set up whole business wellness, and he's going to save the entire business world's wellness. So I'll leave it to you, Brian, to introduce yourself.
Hi, Serene. Thanks so much for inviting me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I know you're kind of kidding, but maybe I'll share a little bit about my ex-Superman lifestyle and why I made the change that I made. So I've worked in the legal sector for 30 years in a series of senior management roles. So a lot of pressure, a lot of long hours, a lot of frustration dealing with lawyers because every lawyer has an opinion. They don't like to be told what to do. So just a lot of change and a lot of stress. And then in my personal life, I had various things happened in the last few years. We bought a very expensive flat here in Hong Kong. We had the social unrest here. My wife has chronic asthma, which has resulted in her being in hospital for 50 nights, I think, in the last 2.5 years. So that was a big impact on her lifestyle, actually also on her mental health. We had the typhoon that destroyed all our water sports equipment, which is my favorite weekend activity. So I had a whole bunch of things that happened, and they basically resulted in me feeling completely burned out. So I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. I was suffering from insomnia. I had chronic upset tummy with a lot of inflammation. So I decided that, I had 30 years of trying to be Superman, and it really was didn't end well for me. So I took a step back, left the corporate world, and I got reflecting on my experience of what happened there and what could I have done differently. And there was a couple of things. One was I realized that I was pretty naive about what I was going through. I just didn't really understand what was happening. I didn't spot the warning signs, and I didn't do anything about them. And I also realized in the corporate context, a lot of bosses and managers also don't really know how to deal with somebody who's struggling. So I wanted to try and change both of those things. So that's why I set up Whole Business Wellness.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And today we are talking about exactly this, right? Which is the Superman myth. And we are really talking about why is it that men feel the need to be Superman and what happens when they can't, right? So describe it to me, right? I mean, what do you personally think is the number one mental health issue facing men right now?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of men are feeling very anxious, I think, at the moment. And I think there's a couple of things that particularly play to that anxiety, especially here in Hong Kong, where I'm based. So part of it is, how can I keep my family safe through this whole pandemic situation? And somewhat related to that is, how can I continue to provide for them? So a lot of men may be concerned about they may be concerned about their own health and their own mental health. They may be in jobs where if they catch the virus, they're not going to get paid to take sick leave, or their company may not be doing that well that they're working for, and they might get made redundant. So I think men feel a very strong sense of obligation to be the protector of their family and to be the provider, the breadwinner. And that can result in a lot of pressure. And for a number of reasons, men are not good at dealing with that pressure. So we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to show our emotions. We don't like to show weakness. We don't like to accept that maybe we don't have all the answers. We don't really know what's going on in terms of our own mental health. And we maybe don't have we don't have the social network to, talk to guys. Guys don't talk about this stuff.
I was going to say, let's see if the audience agrees with you, right? I mean, those of you who are on the call, who are men, or even who are married to men, tell us, do you agree that that is true about men? I mean, what do you feel is the number one mental issue facing men right now? And do you agree with this evaluation that, men don't want to ask for help. They don't want to connect emotionally. They don't want to talk about their issues. I mean, what do you think? Drop your thoughts into the comments. Let us know. Do you agree? And do you think that, no, I mean, I'm a man myself and I do connect and I am willing to ask for help? Yes. But give us a little bit of a background about this, right? I mean, why is this such an issue, particularly with men?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the mental health stats show that more women are diagnosed with depression than men, for example, significantly more. But men are obviously much more prone to suicide, 3.5 times more likely than women. And the research also shows that of those people who go through public health systems around the world for mental health issues, roughly 2/3 are women, suggesting that men probably are not getting the help and the support that they need. So we're not very good at getting help, not very good at asking for help. So I think that's probably one of the main differences between men and women. So we do kind of like to soldier on. We have this strong sense of like independence. I should be able to handle it, whatever it is, and handle it on my own. Whereas I think women are more inclined probably to share things with their friends, to talk about them a little bit more, and to get help. So I think those are some of the key reasons.
I was also going to ask, right? Those of you who are on the line with us, do you feel like you cannot ask for help? Do you feel that you need to have all the answers, that you cannot ask for help, and that it is a problem if you're asking for help from somebody else? If you're a man, obviously, comment for yourself. If you're not a man, comment on a man that you know, okay? Do you think that men cannot ask for help, that they need to be the ones to have all the answers? Honestly, I'm not sure whether that is peculiar to last week. I just had this conversation with Tiffany, and we've also found that many women feel the need to hold it all together, to get everything done, and to be, in a sense, superwoman, to have it all, the career, the house, the personal growth, and so forth, right? And so I'm wondering whether this is something that is common to both genders nowadays, that we all feel that we can't ask for help from anyone else.
Well, I think you make a good point that we all want to have it all. I think that is a big issue for men and women, definitely. And I think social media has really spotlighted that and kind of made it into a complete pressure cooker. So you have to look great and successful on whichever social media you use. And actually, for women, I think social media is probably even tougher than it is for guys. Even guys have body image issues now if they don't look ripped enough or whatever. Yeah, so I'm not saying these are exclusive to men, not at all. There's plenty of women in that situation, and they are trying to do it all. Yeah, no question.
So we are having some disagreements. So Mike says that he'll probably seek his friend's opinion, and he doesn't see that it is a mental health issue for men, right? That as a man himself, he will seek his friend's opinion, and that isn't true for him. And Tiffany, I think, is this Tiffany? I hope it's Tiffany, because I can't see the name. But she said she asked her husband to come to counseling with her, and his response is, I don't have anything to talk about, so why should I go? Right? So she eventually convinced him, but it was like pulling teeth. Okay, he believed that he changed his mind because he needed to be there for her. What do you think? What do you say about that?
Well, I have a few things to say about that. I mean, I'm not surprised that the partner reacted in that way. I would be the same, I think. And one of the issues behind that is that you cannot fix another person. If you're going to go for any sort of counseling or therapy, or even like meditation practice, you cannot force that on somebody. They have to be willing. I mean, you might get them into the counseling room, but they're going to be difficult and they're not going to engage with the therapist, and they're going to blame you afterwards and say it was all your fault. I told you it wasn't going to work. And so I think there are a number of issues with that. I think it's always better to have a willing participant if you're going to go in that direction. And I know that's immensely frustrating because it's often easier for a third party to see that someone's struggling. So, for example, when I told my PA, who had worked with me for many years and really looked after me and made sure I got through my day somehow or other, that I was leaving, she said, "Brian, I'm so pleased for you because you've just been so miserable for so long." And I was going, "Well, why didn't you tell me that before?"
Hang on. You needed somebody else to tell you that you were miserable? Are you sure?
Yes,
Okay, let's hear from more adjusted men, right? So, Mike, talk to us, right? I mean, how do you deal with mental health issues? Because he says, he will talk to his friends, and that sounds like a really healthy way to deal with it. Right? I mean, share some of your tips, Mike. I mean, what do you do? Those of you who are men on this call, I mean, share some of the stuff that you do. I mean, that you feel has been helpful for you in terms of mental health, and share your opinion if you don't think that you have a problem asking for help. No, but seriously, I am shocked. I really am shocked that you needed your PA to inform you that you were miserable for the last few months.
True story. Yeah,
Okay.
it is. I mean, I think the who do you talk to thing. There's a lot of, I don't know if you've read the book Bowling Alone, but Bowling Alone was basically looking at how many people have close friends. And the answer is, it used to be 4 or 5 30 years ago, and now it's less than 1, or maybe none. A lot of people don't feel they have a close friend, and particularly people generally don't have a close friend at work. So if it's a work-related issue, most people. So Mike, you are very lucky. I think that's fantastic that you have got friends that you can open up to and talk about these things. But for a lot of us, actually, it's just not the case. We kind of lost that close connection that we used to have with our friends.
Okay. And let's talk about this, right? I mean, those of you on the call with us, tell us, do you feel the need that you must be the strong, tough one all the time? Do you feel that you must be the one with the answer, especially if you're a leader, I think? And is there a leadership problem? Maybe not so much a man problem, but a leadership problem?
Maybe while people are thinking about that one, I'll just share some research that was done here in Hong Kong last year by the Women's Foundation, which I'm a board member of. So we have a Male Allies program, which I helped to co-found a few years ago. And we wanted to talk to young men in Hong Kong because we had a hypothesis that the younger generation was probably likely to be a bit more in tune with all of this sort of stuff, and a bit more in tune with gender equity issues. So we asked a bunch of university-age students, so young men in their late teens, maybe early 20s, what they thought about the role of men. And what they said was that being a successful man is still about being wealthy, morally upstanding, having a flourishing career, a happy family, and in particular, being a responsible economic provider and protector for their family. They see that as the natural duty of men, right? So that's 19-year-old to 20 or 21-year-old young men in Hong Kong from 11 different universities. And one of them, one of them was saying, and these are obviously guys just about to go into the workforce, and one of them saying, definitely going to be hard for me to find a job. I have a lot of worries about that. Maybe I've got a driving license. Maybe I could work in transport. Maybe I could work in security. Like educated young men thinking, I don't know that I'm going to be able to provide. So yeah, it's a real issue.
Well, Mike has come back to speak to us. He says that he'll probably talk to someone who can share his thoughts on the issues. And you're right that it may be a mental health issue that he's not aware of. Okay, fair enough. But the fact that you have somebody that you can talk to and share your thoughts on issues, I think that's wonderful. Actually, that's very, very good. Because I think, as Brian just said, right, we have less than one close friend. That's quite sad.
It's very sad.
Like, I mean, I was just thinking about it, and I'm thinking, look, if I have an issue, do I have like close friends? And I can easily name like half a dozen, right? So to have like only one, less than one close friend is really sad. And Mike says he usually deals with it in a logical manner. It may or may not work, but he will seek opinions from different friends and family to deal with it, and not to so much linger into the problem, because he feels that after that, mental health issues will develop, right? If we get stuck in a problem. That's true. I mean, I think that's true. And it sounds okay, at the risk of sounding very sexist, it sounds like a very male way of dealing with it. Oh, I have a problem? Okay, let me see how to solve it. Really, it strikes me as a very male way to solve it, to deal with problems.
Yeah, it is. Well, the first thing is that, yes, I mean, ruminating on something that you're worried about definitely is not going to be good for your mental health. I did that a lot. Part of my recovery regime was I had cognitive behavioral therapy, and that is about trying to change some of those thought patterns. So there's the kind of negative spirals that you get into. So yes, absolutely, ruminating is not going to be helpful, not going to be good for your mental health.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, whether it's a particularly male-oriented, I don't know. I mean, I think guys tend to be quite solutions-oriented. Here's a problem, here's the fix. And sometimes the fix is not that obvious. And sometimes, the way of dealing with it is it's more about the process than the actual solution. So the process of talking it through helps you to more appreciate what is that emotion, what is it that I'm feeling, where am I stuck, is that actually realistic, is it based on fact, or am I making all sorts of assumptions and jumping to conclusions and catastrophizing and all the rest of it. So I think going through the process is really important. Jumping to a fix like you need to go do exercise, or you need to do yoga, or you need to do meditation.
Both you and Mike agree it's a very male way of dealing with the problem. And you know why I know this? I've been with my husband for 20 years, and it took me years in the beginning to go like, no, I don't want a solution. I just want you to listen to me about my problem. I can find my own solution, right? And then when the reverse is when he talks to me about his problems, and then I'm like, And she's like, I ask you because I need a solution. Tell me what to do. It's like a complete mess. And that's why Mike says, don't share thoughts with your wife. You're a very wise man, Mike. Don't share thoughts with your wife.
So that's, I mean, that is, that is actually a really important point. What can you disclose to your wife? What's appropriate? Because guys do have that strong, I need to be the strong one here. I need to be the protector. I need to have the answers. I need to figure this out. But for example, when we bought our expensive flat in Hong Kong, it was a bit bigger than we had planned, and it was a bit more expensive than we had planned. And so we ended up spending a significantly larger chunk of our life savings on it than we had planned. And so that gave me a pretty high degree of financial stress, because I was thinking, geez, I'm going to have to work for at least 5 more years, and I'm not sure I can do 5 more days at this point. But I felt like, I don't think I can have that conversation with my wife, because she wants the flat. It's a lovely flat. I want her to have what she will make her happy. I don't want to burden her with my worries about the fact that I hate my job, and I just don't think I can do it. So I think it's actually really important for that sort of conversation to be able to have that with your partner, because there's no point you sitting there stewing on it. She needs to be there with you.
Mike is agreeing with me. She says that his wife only wants him to listen and not give solutions, and men generally want a solution. Yes, I think men, when they come to talk, they are actually trying to brainstorm for a solution. Whereas I think women are trying to brainstorm for a definition of the problem. That's the main difference. I think that becomes the, it took us a couple of years, but we figured it out, So I figured that if he came to me, I have to prepare a list of solutions. And he's learned that, if I go to him, solutions is not his problem. It's just asking questions about where I am. Yes. So Tiffany, if you're still on the line, share with us, how is it like with your husband, right? share with us. And for those of you who are on the line and who are males, do you feel the same as those young men in Hong Kong, that you feel like, this is a time where you worry about not being able to provide for your family or not being able to protect your family? Because especially with the recent COVID and now moving into what may be, economic insecurity, economic upheaval, especially given whatever's happening in Europe. Is that a worry for you? Not being able to provide, not being able to protect? So share with us, tell us how you feel about it, right? Those of you who are men and those of you who are women, feel free to comment on the men in your lives. Yes. So let's go into a little bit more about this. I mean, what is driving this need? I mean, we are in 2022, right? What is still driving this need that men still feel that they must be the provider, they must be the protector?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer is that, a lot of it goes to the way we bring boys up and young men. So there's a concept called the man box, which was developed by Paul Kivel and a guy called Tony Porter. And basically what they observed is that men actually have a very limited range of acceptable ways of behaving. So we're told from a very early age, don't cry, toughen up, man up. Don't show your emotions, don't be girly, don't be gay. Some very, very unhealthy messages, be strong, be good in bed, have lots of partners, look good. There's lots of really toxic stuff, actually, that as a young man, you kind of expected to live up to. And that's part of what I was getting at on social media. If you're on Instagram, I would not want to be a teenage boy on Instagram these days. So much pressure. So all of that happens from a very early age. And it gets reinforced by shaming and bullying. So if you want to be somewhat effeminate, or if you're cool hanging out with gay friends, you will get marginalized. You're expected to conform in a certain way, and both boys and girls will do that to you. Girls will call you out for being a bit sissy just as much as boys will. So boys have that limited range. So it's okay to be a tomboy if you're a girl, but it's not okay to be a sissy, girly boy at all.
For the longest time, I thought that was because of dominance, right? I mean, men still are in a dominant position. So when you have this dominance, it's like, okay, so away from gender, I think it occurs in different areas, socioeconomic class, race, and so on. So if you're the dominant and you adopt the behaviors of the non-dominant group, then that is looked down upon. Whereas if you're not dominant and you adopt the behaviors of the dominant group, that's actually respected. Right? So I think that dynamic plays out in many areas where we don't have equality. I'll put it that way. From Tiffany, she says men have shared with her the importance of hanging their worries on the worry tree outside the household. So work problems are not for the home. And why is there this perpetual separation, right? It doesn't make sense to her that men will compartmentalize.
That one is definitely not just a men thing. I'm sorry. I've worked. My entire team pretty much was female in my last role, and for many of those women, they didn't open up to me at all about anything that was going on outside of work. They didn't want to talk about that. They just wanted to talk about work stuff. So that's definitely not a gender specific one, but I think particularly here in Asia, that work is work and home is home and never the twain shall meet is very strong. But I totally agree with you, Tiffany. It is definitely not healthy, because what goes on in work, we take home. If we're frustrated and angry with our boss, we take that out on our family when we get home. And vice versa. If we're struggling with whatever relationships at home, we're going to be demotivated and not focused and just distracted at work as well. So the two obviously interact. You can't really separate them. We're just human and we carry it all around.
Yeah, but those of you on the call with us, let us know if, regardless of your gender, whether this is something that you do, whether you think actually that it helps your mental health, whether you think that it is, it worsens your mental health. Because I know of many who feel that this actually helps, right? That if they can compartmentalize it, it actually helps their mental health. Let us know. Let us know what you think about it, right? And then a thought on leadership. So regarding my earlier question on leadership, is that nowadays they're more open, to be honest, telling the staff that they do not have the answer. We can work towards the solution. Those of us, maybe I put it this way, right? For those of you who are not the leader, if your leader came to you and said, look, I don't have the solution. I don't know what's going on. Let's sit and discuss and work out the solution together. Do you feel better or do you feel more anxious? Okay, so think a bit about
panic.
Or you panic.
Shit, the boss doesn't know what to do. How the hell am I supposed to know what to do?
Very good. Tell us. Those of you on the call with us.
I love this topic, actually. It's one of my favorites. So, because there is this whole management theory that leaders should be more vulnerable and all of that. I try to be that kind of a leader. I'm more of a servant leader. I'll be there to support and encourage, but not micromanage or direct necessarily. And I found that, particularly here in Asia, that really is not what people want from their boss. That's not what they expect, and that's not what gets rewarded. So I think it's great, Mike, if you feel we are going in that direction. But my personal experience was that I think we've still got an awfully long way to go in most companies.
I must say I agree with you, because I can imagine that if my leader came to me and go like, Serene, I have no idea what's going on and I don't have the solution, but let's just sit down and work through the problem together. I will so panic. And I will start putting my resume together, right? So Mike says, okay, he says the panic is if the relationship with the leader is not open. Okay, fair enough. I think if you see the leader as, I think he's going to say it as well. Yes, he says if we see the leader as a person and as human, then we are less likely to panic. But if we don't see the leader as human and they are more like a figurehead, then yes, we will panic, right? I mean, it's a little bit like over here we have a prime minister. It's a little bit like the prime minister coming to say, we don't know what we're going to do about COVID. We don't have the answers. I think I will panic. I don't know. Those of you on the call with us, tell us, if the leader comes to you, if your leader now comes to you and say, hey, I don't have the answer. Let's sit down and work through it together. Will you panic or will you actually welcome that openness? Talk to us. Come. Yes. So let's talk a little bit about, this is the part where you will really excel as a man, right? Let's talk about solutions. Now we have all the problems down. Let's talk about solutions, right? What do we do? What do we do from 3 points of view, right? The first is, what do we do if we are the man and we are facing issues? Maybe the first question would be, how will we know if we are facing an issue, right? Without our PA writing to us going, you have been miserable for the last few months, please reconsider your life, right? How do I know if I'm struggling and I'm a man, right? And once I know that, what do I do?
Well, if you're lucky enough to have friends who will give you feedback and say you seem a bit out of sorts, or you seem a bit edgy, or a bit grumpy, or a bit whatever, listen to them. That would be pretty important. I think our body is very good also at giving us warning signs. So if you're really struggling to sleep, or if you're getting skin rash or tension, headache, backache, upset tummy, those are all signs that there's something not right. You may go to your doctor, and the doctor may say nothing physically wrong with you. So like when my tummy was completely inflamed, my doctor said, there's nothing physically wrong with you. I go, yes, there is. This is killing me, but it was a mental issue. So I think pay attention to the signs, whether it's people giving you feedback or whether it's your body giving you feedback. Those are both really important. I think then, self-care is important. So exercise, getting regular sleep, getting a little bit of daylight and fresh air, getting in nature if that's possible. And other simple practices like, switching your phone off a little bit before bedtime, so you're not constantly on the phone, and not switching your phone on first thing in the morning and looking at all those emails from your boss, which gets your stress hormones right up to maximum. Journaling can be helpful. I found that quite helpful, just writing down, what did I achieve today, what went well, what am I worrying about? What have I got to do tomorrow? Just writing stuff like that down can make it seem more manageable somehow. So meditation I found really helpful. Just breathing exercises, simple mindfulness exercises, just help to calm the mind, particularly if your mind is racing and you're ruminating and you've got lots of thoughts flying around. Just going for a walk, observing your environments, just listening into your breathing. That's a simple mindfulness technique most people will be familiar with. Or just simple breathing exercises. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, that kind of stuff. So there's lots of things that you can do. But ultimately, I think having those sort of human connections with people who you can have that conversation with. So yeah, we've probably all got a lot of friends and mates, and we can go to the pub or go have coffee and chat about football or the news or the situation in Ukraine or all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with how we're feeling. But very few of us have the sort of guy friends where we can have a deep and meaningful conversation, where we can have a really vulnerable conversation where we will not be judged, or not be told to toughen up, a man out, or just pull yourself together, or just be told you'll get through it. Like toxic positivity is also a big issue. It'll be fine. You're strong. You'll get through this. It'll be okay. Don't worry about it. That's, if you're really struggling, those sort of things are very unhelpful to hear.
I'm not sure. So Tiffany was saying that, what we need is somebody who will call it as we see it. You're bringing a curmudgeon, fix yourself, right? Somebody who will actually tell you that, yes, you should fix yourself right now. You are not doing well. So rather than, you'll be fine, you'll be okay, like you said, you are not okay, fix yourself right now, may be the more important message. Yes.
Doesn't sound very empathetic, does it?
No, but honestly, right? If you have someone, male or female, in your life, and like Brian, obviously miserable for quite a while, I think it's fair to go and maybe, however you want to say it, but to say that, hey, you really don't seem to be doing well. Is there something that should change, right? We talked last week, Tiffany, about something has got to give, right? At some point, you realize something has got to give. I am not going to do this career, mother, household, personal growth, whatever thing. It's not happening. I'm not Superwoman, right? And I think if you have these friends in your life, it's kindness to go and tell them that, hey, something isn't quite right. Is there something you want to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And
that's exactly right. But giving advice like you got to go fix yourself is really unhelpful. It's very unvalidating, and it minimizes that person's experience, and it puts like the blame. It's actually blame. It's you are weak, failing. You need to sort yourself out. That's blame. Like people are already feeling some sense of shame. If you've got some sort of mental health issue, you are definitely going to feel shame. So being told to fix yourself is really unhelpful.
Let's do this, right? So let's say I am the one facing real issues, right? And you can see that I'm miserable for the last 6 months, right? How would you say it? You're my friend. You've seen that I'm miserable. What would you say, Brian?
So I would say something like, Serene, we've known each other a long time. What I've noticed in the last few weeks is that you seem a little bit not your normal self. And I'm concerned that, you're a good friend and I really value you. And I just wanted to give you that feedback and just ask you if you're okay and if there's anything going on that you'd like to talk about.
And I'll give you the typical response, which is, "Oh, I'm okay. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Don't worry." That is the most typical response, I think. What do you do at that point?
So at that point, you have some choices. You could just say, okay, well, look, when you're ready to talk about it, I'm always willing to listen. Or you could say, if depending on your relationship, Serene, look, I'm glad that you feel like you're okay, but I've never seen you like this before, and honestly, I'm just concerned because I think there is something maybe there. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But if you would like to, you know me well. I'm here to listen. If there's something going on, it's nothing to be ashamed of. We all have tough patches, and we can get through it together.
I'm just thinking, are there questions we can ask that would help people kind of come to the self-awareness that something is not quite right? Right? Are there actual questions you can ask people?
Well, I mean, I think you can ask about things like, how have you been sleeping? What's on your mind at the moment? Have there been any changes at work that have been, material? How are you getting on with your partner? You can ask us simple questions like that. Physically, how have you been feeling? Have you been able to get your exercise? If you know that person's lifestyle, whether they regularly walk or jog or go to a gym, you can check in and just say, have you been able to keep doing those things? Or, so I think you can just gently ask around some of those areas around, like lifestyle, diet, exercise, connection with friends. How often are you getting out? Like, we used to go out all the time. I've noticed that we haven't really been out in the last month, so that seems a bit unusual. I'd love to take you out, but if you're not feeling like you want to, maybe that's something we should talk about as well.
Okay, so I think Tiffany is saying the same thing, right? So she says that, fix yourself can be harmful. So how do you break through that? And this is what, Brian is trying to demonstrate. Honestly, Brian, I don't know if it is, too gentle to break through some of the barriers that people have. But I do find that if you ask them, are there things in their lives that, emotional control, changes in their lifestyle, extreme fatigue, and people can kind of think a little bit about it. They may not give you an answer, but actually just giving them the signs, like, hey, have you had, changes in your lifestyle, for example, sleep, eating patterns? Have you felt extreme fatigue? Have you lost control of your emotions? Do you feel like you can't cope or you're overwhelmed? And actually giving them the time to go back and think about it. And then after that, you're like, hey, I'm here. You can talk to me if you want. Or if not, here's a number you can call anonymously. That's also helpful. Now, let's go the other way around, right? Let's say if I'm not the person, but I am either the partner, the leader, the co-worker, and I'm looking at this person and I'm going, okay, quite obviously not coping. Or maybe we should start with that. How do we know that someone on our team is not coping?
Yeah, well, I think you will see their performance dip one way or another. So, they may be less focused, they may be less creative, they may be less collaborative, they may seem to be procrastinating a lot, turning up late for meetings, coming into the office late in the morning, just being a bit more difficult, a little bit more grumpy, maybe making spelling mistakes. That was one for me. Like, normally my emails are beautifully written and there's no grammatical or spelling mistakes. And when I was not in my best and I reread some of my emails, I was thinking, who was the person that sent that email? Because it just could not have been me, full of lots of mistakes. So there's always lots of little signs like that. But yeah, I mean, one way or the other, the work performance will be affected because you're just not able to focus, you're not able to think clearly, and so on. So it's usually not hard to spot.
I tell people that one of the first signs is if they're working into the wee hours of the night, right? And if you're receiving emails and you're receiving reports like at 1 a.m., 11 p.m., that is usually one of the first signs that people are not coping anymore. And that is the point before they start to have all these performance drop, missing of deadlines and so on. If you start to notice that people are working unreasonably long hours, that's probably the first step as a leader that you need to go and talk to them and go like, hey, is something up? Is there something we need to talk about? Because it may not be the work, right? So a lot of leaders say, hey, but the work is the same. But for example, if I am living with a COVID patient over the last 2 years, right, and I'm suddenly tasked with, I have to do everything in the house because my partner is in isolation and I have to take care of him or her on top of that, then quite obviously that will eat into my work and into my work performance. And while the work may not have increased, that I may no longer be able to cope just because of other things, right? So that's, I think, as a leader, it's time for us to go, hey, what's happening here? Why these hours? What's happening at home? Yeah. And before, I think that's probably the first sign before anything else goes wrong. Because after that is the missed deadlines and the lowering of performance, as you said.
But these are difficult conversations. So the research shows that about 85% of people are really not comfortable to have these conversations in the workplace. And actually, it's one of the programs that we offer is how do you talk to your colleagues about exactly this issue? And it's very popular. We actually use actors and we will role play the sort of conversation like we just did a minute ago and let people see, how did that sound? How did it feel? Did that feel safe? Did it feel like it was encouraging the individual to open up, or were lots of closed questions that were, so if I'm the boss, am I leading and directing the conversation, or am I giving you space to share what you want to share and to talk about what you want to get off your chest? So it's not rocket science, but it does take a little bit of practice, and those are not the sort of conversations that we typically have in the workplace, because it is very transactional, fix this, fix that, let's find a solution, let's just do it sort of stuff that we normally deal with. So it's an unusual conversation to be having in the workplace.
I think what I usually tell a boss is, if you don't have a personal relationship with this staff, then you should not be talking to them about this, because the chances of it coming across as offensive is so much higher. But if you actually have a real relationship with this person, then that's where you can talk. And if you don't have it, figure out who on your team has a real relationship with this person, so that they can go and talk and go like, hey, are you all right? Right? And actually get a real response other than, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah. Because that's not helpful. And Lisa has come with some suggestions, and actually I think this is perfect. Eating well, healthy sleep pattern, exercising, emotionally balanced. I've had to deal with quite a few friends approaching me for burnout related issues, and one of the first thing I've noticed across the board is sleep. If you feel really burnt out and if you're really stressed out, if you kind of overwhelmed and you can't cope, first thing, go and get a good night's rest. Like literally go and get, like, sleep for 10 hours, sleep for 11 hours, whatever it takes to get a good night's rest. And then wake up in the morning and reevaluate your problems. Because a lot of the times that sleep debt warps our own valuation of our capacity, I think. So I think I totally agree with Lisa, right? The eating well bit, I hate to say this, but stressed out people tend to eat more poorly. That's what all the research says. The more stressed out you are, the worse your diet is. I mean, that's true of you as well, Brian.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, unhealthy coping mechanisms are, yes, definitely one of the symptoms. So yeah, that could be, have a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine, a couple of beers, or comfort food, pot of Haagen-Dazs, dark chocolate, Belgian ice cream. I love that. Or it could be other kinds of unhealthy coping. It could be getting kind of aggressive and antisocial. It could be porn addictions or gaming addictions or gambling addictions. Any kind of addiction is almost certainly mental health related. So yeah, there's lots of unhealthy coping mechanisms, and men have a much wider scope for behaving in antisocial ways than women actually. So we have all sorts of very unhealthy habits.
Yes, men are about 2 to 3 times more likely to be addicted to a substance or to another, other addictions as well. And actually than women. And like you said, 2 to 3 times more likely to commit suicide. So, speaking of unhealthy coping mechanisms, and Lisa was talking about finding a suitable life coach who thinks alike, is in sync with personal professional goals. I actually did a session 5 or 6 weeks ago with Warren about coaching, about what constitute coaching, what doesn't constitute coaching. And I agree with you, there are a lot of coaches around, and therefore the thing to do is to shop around. Yeah. And then Lisa was saying, Mike says, to him, eating well is eating what they like. Like Brian says, comfort food, that is eating well. Well, I we've had these conversations over and over about, you know, the joy that food brings versus the nutritional value, right? How do you evaluate how much joy, comfort that food brings in versus the nutritional value, and which is more important? I think that's another conversation for another time. But I must say this though, that certain foods stress your body out more and certain foods less. Okay, so for instance, eating very oily food, that gives a lot more stress to your body, whereas eating something that's lighter, soup, vegetables, fruits, um, it's a bit easier for your body. So if when you are really stressed out and you are exhausted, the last thing you want to do is eat something really heavy, really oily that actually makes us even more exhausted. So just think of that as a kind of a guideline when it comes to food. And Tiffany says, Tiffany asked you if you find role playing to be acceptable in your workshops, or whether people feel uncomfortable to do what's outside of the norm. How do you increase the comfort in trying
Yeah.
these things out?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, I work with an actor, so the actor and I will do the role play. So the participants only have to comment on what they saw and direct, like, what would you do differently? Um, what other questions might you have asked, or how might you have approached that conversation differently? Um, so I have had one friend who I happen to have one friend who was at the client that we were working with, and she was willing to do the role play with me, and she and I had coffee probably 3 times to prep for that, and we just kind of worked up to doing that role play together, which was really fun. But yeah, I think particularly in the Asian context, it's not something that people are comfortable with. So it's not something that I would push towards. But if anybody wants to jump in and sort of play the role and ask the questions themselves, that we always leave that opportunity.
So like forum theater style, right? So you guys act,
Yes, forum
whereas
theatre. Yes,
foreign theater style, and
exactly.
then
Yeah.
participants just tell you what they should be doing next. Okay. And Lisa is agreeing that Singapore is a food paradise. Well, so is Hong Kong, where Brian is from. I
Totally.
can't say that we're more of a food paradise than Hong Kong, honestly. Yeah. And I think the temptation, okay, I will say this, right? So eating poorly applies to both men and women. But I find men's coping mechanism to be a lot more revolving around addictions. So, for example, drinking heavily, smoking, use of illicit drugs, and as you said, porn addiction, gaming addiction, gambling addiction. I find that there's much more of this around how men are coping. And I think women have a bigger tendency to go to the ice cream, right? But that that unhealthy coping mechanism, I think, is one of the reasons why we are facing more suicide in men, even though mental health rates are so much lower.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I think it goes to that independence and bottling it up and being strong and finding your own way through it and not getting help. That's why we turn to those alternative ways of coping to make ourselves feel better in whatever short-term, unhealthy, unsatisfactory way it is. But that's the only way out that we can see.
So let's kind of round this up. I want to do kind of a quick recap, right? So for yourselves personally, if you are a man and you suspect you may or may not have a mental health issue, I think the first question to ask yourself is, are you happy or are you miserable? Now, if you need to ask your PA about it, please ask your PA about it. But that's the first question, right? Are you happy? Are you happy where you are, being who you are? And if you're not, then this is the time to go out and maybe get some feedback, talk a little bit about what are some of the resources out there. We know, I mean, there's been this, we've just discussed about how men find it difficult to ask for help. What would you suggest? I mean, what kind of suggestions would you give to men in terms of help seeking behavior?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for example, I went to a lunch and learn at my previous firm, and we had a counsellor come in from our helpline provider who talked about depression and anxiety. And I thought, geez, I've got all of those symptoms. So like the obvious thing to do would have been to go and maybe talk quietly to the person that was giving that lecture, or to call the helpline and say, look, I've just had this lecture, I've noticed all of these things, should I be worried? Or I could have gone, well, I did actually say to my colleague who was sitting next to me, I think I've got all these symptoms. And she said, me too. So neither of us was any better off. Or I could have gone to my doctor, which I only did when I could not bear the insomnia any longer. I was getting like 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours sleep a night. And my tummy was just all over the place. So I went with those physical symptoms, actually, not because I thought I had a mental problem. And she said, okay, I can do this, I can do that, give you sleeping pills, whatever, sort out the tummy, do some tests. And then she said, but, do you think it would be helpful to see a psychiatrist? And I thought, do you know what? Actually, yeah, that is what I need. Yeah, so I was lucky because, I did get help, but I could have got help a lot earlier if I'd been more aware of what was actually going on.
So for those of you who are interested, there is a list from the NHS. It has a whole list of different symptoms. So like Brian, if you could go and take a look at it, and if you're checking most of that, like yes, then I think we are all intelligent adults here. You know what to do next. We're not going to tell you, but go and have a look at it and figure out if this is an issue that you need to face. And if it is, let's just put it this way. I think the last 2 years have been stressful for everyone, males, females, everybody included. And I think we are coming to the realization that we can't do it, as usual, because we now are facing a totally different world. And so if we need the help, that's what we need. And for those of us who are leading people, just a short recap, like what Brian says, if your people don't seem to be coping very well, then having a conversation with them, building a relationship, having a conversation, maybe leaving it a bit open to go, how have you been? How are you coping? That would be helpful as well. And perhaps trying that out before something really happens, right? Before the guy collapses, before there's depression, and just having those conversations on a regular basis. And
yeah, I think that the other final thing I would say is, just be kind to ourselves. I think we all have that inner voice, and it's chatting away in our head, and it's very critical. It's probably the tiger parents from way back when we were kids, saying, "What, you only got 95%? What happened to the other 5%?" So we are super self-critical, and we would never talk to our best friend the way that we tend to talk to ourselves. And that's a massive issue. So if we could all just be a little bit more kind to ourselves, a little bit more self-compassionate, and just give ourselves a break, because it is entirely human to struggle and to not have all the answers and sometimes not really be able to cope that well. It does happen to everybody at some point, and that's not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something to beat yourself up about. It just happens. The key is to figure out what it is and to get the help that you need.
And if it makes you feel any better, WHO predicts that at any given moment in time, 1 in 5 adults have a mental health issue at any given moment in time. And throughout a lifespan, a person has a 1 in 3 chance of getting a mental health issue. So this is by no means a rare condition. By no means, it's just like we all get sick, we get mentally sick. This is by no means rare. So I'm just, for those of you who are on the call with us, any last comments, anything you want to say in closing with us? Brian, any last words of wisdom that you want to drop on us?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much. I mean, I think it's we've made all the points I wanted to make. It's been really a fun conversation as always. So, just thank you very much.
Okay. So for those of you who let's see. Well, Lisa says, thank you to both of us for taking us from Healthy Manly Journey. Thank you. I hope that this has been helpful, even though you're not a man, but for the men in your lives, but even for yourselves as well. I think the last point about Brian saying be kind to ourselves, I definitely think that's true, because we had the same conversation with Tiffany last week, and about the kind of expectations women put on ourselves. and how we beat ourselves up when we don't live up to it. So I think it's true of both gender. And yes, thank you, Mike. I'm glad you enjoy it. I hope you agreed with some of what we are saying about men. And yes, thank you very much for joining us, Tiffany. Let us know. I mean, if you have any other further comments, and if you want to connect with Brian, this is Brian's LinkedIn, and if you want to connect with his business, this is his business address right at the bottom here. Okay, so his business is all about whole business wellness. His aim is to be Superman nonetheless and save the world in a different way by making the whole business world, well, yes. So he's still being Superman, but just saving the world a different way. All right. So thank you very much. Next week we are coming back to talk a little bit about another leadership topic, and it'll be the same time on Thursday. And I hope to see you guys all again. Oh, let's see. We have one last comment. Yes, he says totally. Totally, must save the world. Yes, that's Mike. Yes. I hope we've convinced you not to be Superman, but if we fail, it's all right. Yeah, you can continue. I'm sure you are capable. But thanks for coming by, guys, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.